bevuto una bicchiere del vino rosso di Quercia e penso che lei deve avere lo stesso. Okay, everyone, welcome to Monday. It is the Plant-Based Business Hour, and I'm Elysabeth Alfano. I have a glass of wine with me today because I am taking you all to Italy. So why don't you belly up with Quercia wine and sit in a comfortable space because you're not going to want to leave this interview. I have Sebastiano Cossia Castiglioni with me today. Before I bring on this important guest, really, I can say that the vegan world does not turn without this man. He is such a visionary and key linchpin. I want to give him the floor to talk. But before I do that, I want to remind everyone why I have the Plant-Based Business Hour. I want this platform so that consumers and investors can find the small plant-based businesses that aren't getting all the press that the mainstream press gives to Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods. Of course, if we're going to change the entire food system for the world, we do need more than Impossible and Beyond. I love them both. They've both been on this show. And I want people to realize, just regular consumers, flexitarians, etc., that there are plant-based options out there for them. And I want those plant-based businesses to get out there as strong and as fast as they can. For example, today in Yahoo News, the chairman of Tyson said, the food supply chain is breaking. Well, I would argue that the food supply chain is broken. It is an inefficient model that supplies us with an inferior protein that does not do a good job of using resources or feeding the world for that matter. And as we go from 7 billion people to 10 billion people, that equation is even more inefficient and more substandard. So we need plant-based businesses now more than ever, which is why I want to bring on my guest, Sebastiano Cossia Castiglioni. And here he comes, and I will give him the floor immediately. But before I do that, I want to say salute a lei and grazie per tutti.
Thank you for having me, Elizabeth. It's a pleasure to be here. And what you're doing is very important in many ways, giving investors, but also companies, small companies, future companies, existing companies, a place to speak up and connect is fundamental. Because as you said, you correctly summarized, we need to change the food system completely and from the ground up. I was offended by the ad that Tyson ran today
in the New York Times.
In the New York Times, I don't know if you noticed that they talk about the food they provide as sustainable and safe, and they're lying through their teeth. And by the way, I'm going to own my own opinion here, of course, they show the same disregard they show towards animals every day. They show towards all the people who work for them, making them sick, not caring about their safety, exposing them to risk. And Tyson did this, and Smithfield did even worse. And it's all the same. They have no soul, no conscience, no dignity of any kind. We already know the entire meat industry is amoral. There cannot be morality in producing food by torturing sentient beings and getting people sick. They know that every time they put out a product and it's bought, someone is getting worse. Their health is getting worse, and they will need medical attention. They will get sick. They will eventually develop heart disease or diabetes or all the other illnesses that are linked to animal food. And they will eventually die younger than they would if they didn't eat that horrible food. So absolutely not safe, not sustainable. And as we can see, their highly industrialized production system completely failed. There are industrialized systems to produce everything nowadays. And when, one fails, the other picks up, and you see this in everything in transportation and telecommunications and in production of goods. And you see it in agriculture, another subject that we should touch. But what happens with the meat industry is that it just fails because the foundations on which it rests are completely wrong. It's completely inefficient, and dangerous in every way. I mean, imagine if people actually had to depend on meat for their nourishment, and these guys, because of the way that they're unorganized, shut down. It's now almost 25% of production in the US in a matter of a few weeks. How ridiculous is that? How can they even think of being serious corporations? They cannot even manage their own production system. And by the way, let it be clear, they're not suffering. Immediately they unload the suffering, the economic suffering, onto all their suppliers. And so the farmers are suffering directly, the farmers who are trapped by contracts that they can get out of to supply animals at prices that don't make them gain a living. And these poor animals that are tortured throughout and treated as objects. And so these companies are the epitome of total failure, unorganized, and providing low quality, dangerous, healthy, destructive products. And by the way, they survive as corporations because of subsidies. They're not even economically viable if you just let them do what they want to do. They do not know what they're doing. So what a sad day. Let's hope that this blow is a big blow to this industry and that it starts a revolution in the field.
You've said so many things there, and this interview is all about giving you the floor. It is such an honor to have you here. You truly are the linchpin to so much investing in the vegan world. I want to quickly tell people, because I apologize that I did not, I want to quickly tell people a little bit about your background, and then I want to immediately comment on what you've said. So I think we can consider you, basically, we start with the Medicis in the 1400s and 1500s as Renaissance people, and we fast forward immediately to Sebastiano Cossia Castiglioni. You have a long history in dealing with artwork and with wine, biodynamic wine, with Cocea. You're also an advisor to NRS Health and Wellness. You were an advisor to the Italian government. Let me see that I've got this right, and I do. It's right here. I'm so sorry. Your CV is so long that I have to. Oh, here you are. The advisor to the Minister in Foreign Direct Investment, senior advisor to the Ministry of Economic Development in Italy, and then of course you have your own investing companies, Vegan Capital and NKGB, strategic investing, and then you are on with the as a partner with Blue Horizon, and as I said before, Vegan Capital. So I just want people to know the sort of person that we're dealing with. You have been addressing this issue in your investments, your own personal portfolios, and the portfolios of others for decades now. In addition, you have a long understanding in your way of thinking about the health implications and the financial implications, and you come to, and the scientific implications, and you come to that from different industries. So you truly are a Renaissance man, and you've chosen to give your attention to the vegan economy. So for that, I am forever grateful, as are so many businesses. I just want to hop on and comment on what you've said, and then we'll talk about how do we turn the Titanic, as I like to say. Offended by that New York Times article. So I actually felt that article, this is my own take. I own my own opinions as well. And I do want Tyson to know that they are always welcome on my program. And I do understand that Tyson Ventures is dabbling in the vegan economy. They were investing in Beyond Meat, and they got out right before Beyond Meat was an IPO. I'm sure they're still thinking that one through. But they are now investing in plant-based seafood. And I do commend them for this. And I do encourage them to come on this show because it's a great discussion to have. But I did feel that ad was an excuse, and that they're trying to obfuscate their responsibility in not organizing their businesses well enough, because we've been hearing about social distancing now for 6 weeks. Plant-based businesses are doing social distancing, as are other businesses that are not in the food sector. So they weren't doing that. They weren't organizing their businesses as they should. And then they get this bailout of all this money, sort of adding insult to injury, if you will, calling themselves an essential business when people have been living on rice and beans and other plant-based vegetables for decades, vegetables being where all proteins come from, whole food, plant-based grains and vegetables where all protein comes from. So I really felt that was a marketing tool more than anything to say, oh gosh, we haven't been handling our COVID situation very well. We better get out in front of the public and say, we're essential. You need us. Don't be mad at us. That's how I read into that. But more importantly, because we could really rip that ad apart. More importantly, the chairman, John Tyson, argues that the system is broken, and the system is breaking, and I argue that it is broken. So, indeed, with that, Sebastiano, how do we fix it? Or let me re-ask, do we fix it, or do we scrap the whole food system and start anew?
Well, you're asking several questions.
Yes.
We fix it because we cannot simply disrupt it. The people have eating habits and traditions, and so we need to walk with them along the path of change, and not just, of course, it would be better for the planet if there were an abrupt change, but we can't really advocate for that, and we have to respect people's attitudes and will to change. This is a good occasion to bring everything under discussion. The system is definitely broken, and it's showed that. I would like to reconnect to something that you mentioned before. Let's not forget, it is an official fact that the meat industry is the industry with the highest injury on the job statistically.
Yes.
What that shows you is that the system itself is wrong. Not only you're torturing and killing animals, and absolutely innocent, of course, but you're also injuring people all the time. So the fact that, for instance, the plant of Smithfield became, I don't know if you read this, but it is the largest COVID cluster in the US.
Yes.
One meat production plant. That tells you everything. Their standards are disgusting. So how do we change the system? Well, in many ways, there are several companies that are coming up with fantastic ideas and alternative products that replace meat and replace fish and replace all the other products, and there's plenty of choice. What's very interesting is that all of these products can be brought to the consumer with a fraction of the carbon footprint, for instance, but in fact, no pollution and no waste, and there are so many fantastic ideas. I'm sure you've heard about these new companies. Yes, there is plant-based protein, but there's also protein now that is produced without animals, without plants, simply by fermentation, by precise fermentation, which means that in the future you can. There are tests already, but in the future we'll be able to produce the basic and most important molecules of food to nourish people, perfectly healthy molecules that have everything that we want in production plants that are inside the cities, inside where people consume. So you have healthy food because it's healthy. Actually, you're just recreating the same molecules that you would dream of having, but without any transportation, any complication, with a fraction of the use of energy and water and everything. So we'll be able to do that in a short amount of time. In the meanwhile, we have to provide replacements for the products that this deadly industry is shoving down people's throats. And by the way, again, let me underline that the meat industry and the dairy industry.
Oh no. Sebastiano, are you still here? I see you stuck on my screen. Sebastiano. We're going to wait for Sebastiano to come back. I don't know if we've lost him officially. Sebastiano, you're back with me?
I'm back. Can you hear me?
I can. We lost you, and we're going to pick right up when at least on my screen, I lost you. You said, and I want to underscore.
Okay, so am I back on now?
You are back on. Yes.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, shoot. Okay, Castiano has fallen off. So I'm going to take this opportunity to pick up on some of the things that he said. This is an incredible interview, so I'm never going to interrupt him. So I will let him speak as long as he wants. I'll follow up on what he said. It's not just that the meat industry has the highest injury rate, it has a very high depression rate, a very high alcoholism rate for the communities surrounding these slaughterhouses, and a very high domestic violence rate. Because if you have domestic violence, if you are working in a job that is killing for a living, then of course you're going to have high alcoholism, high depression, high physical injury, and high violence in that community. While you were gone, Sebastiano, I just wanted to pick up on some of the thoughts that you were saying. If it's okay with you, I'll pick up a little bit on what you were saying, and then we can continue where you left off.
Thank you.
So I'm just telling everybody about it's not just high injuries in these places, it's also depression, alcoholism, and domestic violence, and regular violence, high crimes, etc. Because these communities are so damaged by these businesses that are all centered around killing and disgusting environmental runoff. In addition, you talked about how there are companies out there that have a fraction of the environmental imprint. I'll talk about a study coming out of the University of Michigan. It's an independent study. They did do it about Beyond Meat. So all the other companies are going to be pretty close to this, but specifically Beyond Meat compared to a hamburger, Beyond Meat saves 99% more water, 93% more land, 90% more greenhouse gas emissions, and 40% more energy. So you're talking about an environmental footprint of the plant-based foods that is much, much less. And the last thing that you said before we lost you is that in the future, even beyond plant-based foods, we're going to be able to develop really high-end, efficient, high-quality proteins right there in the inner cities. In fact, Chicago's doing this right now with a company called Nature's Find. They're building microbes, but there's also cellular agriculture companies and cellular aquaculture companies all around the world, Israel, Spain, Asia, working on just using the cells of these animals. So there's no transportation, there's no delivery mechanism really involved, very efficient. You're only growing the part of the animal that you use. There's no torture, there's no chemicals, there's no waste of land and water, there's no time waste. So, but picking up right when you left off, you said you wanted to underscore.
And sorry that my connection broke there. What I wanted to underscore is that once again, the meat industry and the dairy industry could not exist if not because of subsidies.
Yes.
They live because they unload their huge costs onto the taxpayers. And I'm not just talking about the obvious economic cost because their operations cannot function, but the environmental cost and the social cost and everything else that they bring. And the gigantic healthcare bill that they unload onto people and the community. So they're economically not viable already. If they had to pay for the damage they cause and the problems they cause, they could not survive. But back to the innovative industries, you're mentioning cell culture meat, and that's one thing. But I'm referring to precise fermentation as opposed to that, which is very different. Precise fermentation is not where you have animal cells and grow them as you would in a biolab. But precise fermentation is something where you start from bacteria, and bacteria instructed in a certain way produce molecules that are exactly what you want. So you can produce a protein molecule, and ideally you can imagine that you will produce the ingredients of the perfect food. So you will have proteins, but at the same time you can have iron, and you can have vitamins, and you can have this and that, and you have the perfect ingredients produced in a stainless steel tank under controlled temperature, and that's all there is. And so that is one step further of innovation, and all of this is happening.
For those of you who follow my show regularly, which you all should, we have had Thomas Jonas on this show, and he is the CEO and founder of Nature's Find. And I think that's what you're referring to, this fermentation process with microbes, which are neither animal nor plant. Really, they come from the mushroom family of fungi. And you can grow, as Thomas would say, on a cafeteria tray. You can grow exactly what you would like. And as I understand it, at the end of the year, so Thomas is in my hometown of Chicago. I split my time between Chicago and Los Angeles. So he's going to give me a tour of the plant. But even more exciting is that he says by the end of the year, we'll be able to have perhaps yogurt and chicken, all of these things. So it's not just one form like a burger, but other products coming all from one plant where there used to be slaughterhouses.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah,
and
it is
an thing that we need. And imagine a system where you have food that is produced exactly where it is consumed in the quantities that are necessary at a cost that is so much lower, a fraction of the cost of food now, that you basically disrupt the system again because you can feed everyone for a fraction of the cost. So, and you can feed healthy things. The tragedy of again, the food industry as it is today is that those who receive the worst food are those in most need. So the poorest sections of society are the ones that are fed horrible, unhealthy fast food because they don't have economically access to better food. And that's something that needs to change drastically as well.
Yes, and so unfortunate because it used to be that the poorer communities were eating the best food, rice and beans, and because these things are really inexpensive. And then they've been pushed onto fast food and their health has been forever changed. I also want to talk about something that Sebastiano knows, but I just want to clarify for people. This is a little hard to wrap your mind around, but animal agriculture is basically responsible for world famine. So if there are areas in the world that aren't getting enough food, it's because when we cut down all the trees, and remember, we need trees, they pull carbon from the air. We're cutting down more trees than need be because we have to grow more grains than need be, because do we feed these grains that have protein and fiber to people around the world? No, we give them to animals, which are inefficient mechanisms. We spend time, water, land. I'm not even talking about cruelty right now. We spend time, water, land. We have to give them more grains and more grains and more grains. We could have fed people by now, but instead we're using this inefficient machine known as the animals that we love. And then there's this chemical waste to boot. So it's kind of hard to wrap your mind around, but animal agriculture is the reason why there isn't enough food out there, and that we cut down more trees than we need to.
And by the way, connecting to what you're saying, as you know, the factory farming is one of the main producers of greenhouse gases.
Yes.
Because the animals emit methane, and they also do that because they're fed an inappropriate diet and they're kept unhealthy their entire life. Right. So the entire system is insane. I saw something that really struck me as it shows the world is insane. Someone has designed a mask to put on the face of a cow to capture the methane that's emitted by the cow, as if that were something that makes sense. I mean, the folly, the craziness of this system is that it just keeps building on itself, getting worse and worse.
So I want to talk about this because it seems to be throwing good money after bad, following the system that is clearly broken, trying to continually band-aid something that barely sticks together as it is. Where are we going from here? So I think a lot of people watching this show may be vegans or plant-based or flexitarians, and they're thinking, okay, well, we have Beyond Meat and Impossible and some other options, so why isn't the whole world going vegan? Culture and history and tradition aside, it's not as easy as that to scale up small companies and get them to feed the world. So we have this stopgap happening right now in the business sector. Talk to us about what is urgently needed to really move the needle. I don't think it's innovation as much as it is the middleman of factories producing these items. I don't know. Walk me through that, please.
Yeah. Well, I have good news for you there.
Oh, good.
The world of food and many of the companies involved in food are not sleeping. You mentioned Tyson invested in Beyond Meat, and there are many other meat and dairy companies that hedged their bets and started investing in innovative foods. At the same time, some very innovative people, among them my very good friend Roger Lienhardt and partner, founder of Blue Horizon, has imagined a new strategy, which is going to the people who produce the food that we want to change and convince them to produce the food that we need. And
Yes.
this is working. So as Live Kindly company, we have investors from the other side of the aisle that come and want to change and want to contribute. And I'm in conversation with several actors in the food space around the world who currently produce what we don't like, but they want to get involved in producing plant-based food and alternatives. So the great news is that people with experience in scaling, producing, distributing, marketing, and bringing food to everyone through all the retail chains are joining us in a revolution, which is what we need, because the old model of the small vegan company producing a few packages and then being unable to scale up is obviously an obstacle. There are phenomenal companies like Beyond Meat. They have so much good energy and so many bright minds that they were able to scale up to incredible numbers in a short amount of time. And Impossible Foods is phenomenal as well. Yeah. And Just, as you know, is scaling up and doing a phenomenal effort. And China is really key. By the way, I want to share with you one statistic that I learned about China a few years ago. Brought by Richard Brubaker, this phenomenal guy who studies sustainability and systems in general. And the statistic is, at the rate of increase of consumption of pork, of pig meat in China, if that rate continued by 2050, if we dedicated the entire planet Earth to raising pigs, it would not be enough. So, obviously the system doesn't work. But I'm sure you've read the good news from China, Starbucks and other companies bringing plant-based choices. And there's great sensitivity there. And the government a few years ago announced a plan saying by 2025, China needs to cut down its meat consumption by 50%. That's the most ambitious plan any country has ever publicly made. So and when China shifts, that's a huge chunk of the world's population. So hopefully that's going to happen, and other countries will follow. And
yes,
sadly, the United States, which are the most innovative country by definition, are held back by corruption, because you can't call it any other way. You have lobbies coming and paying politicians openly to keep legislation or change legislation or make legislation worse to protect their business against the interest of people. That's corruption, because you can't define it in any other way.
Yes, and it's against people and against the healthcare system, really, because we ultimately have to pay for that healthcare system, which when, decades of eating meat and dairy, and then, of course, everyone enters into the healthcare system at 65, and every one of them has health issues.
Yeah, and then there you have other evil lobbies that are happy that people are sick so they can sell them a lot of drugs and this and that. It's all part of the same system, of course.
Well, I love that you bring up China, because we've talked about a lot on this show. David Young, whom, of course, Omnipork, and I love him. We talked about how China has the most to benefit from going plant-based, because it seems to, if you were an official in China, you'd be looking at our healthcare costs and you'd be saying, I don't want that for 1.4 billion people. And then also, if you're in trade talks, it's very difficult to have a strong stance when the person that you are negotiating against controls your food. So So I would think that China would really want to get control of their food and start looking at more plant-based options and cellular agriculture as a way of controlling more, because
They definitely do. They
the pig
absolutely
population
do.
isn't
There
sustainable, as you
is,
say.
I'll share this with you. One of the largest food companies owned by the state, owned by the country in China, is COFCO. And COFCO came with me to visit. One of the members of the board came with me to visit Beyond Meat back in I think it's 2014 or 2015. They were interested already, and they knew what they wanted, and they're absolutely aware of the issues and the fact that they need to change the system. Also, I consider that the Chinese healthcare system has tradition being based on prevention as opposed to cure. So it needs
Different.
We need a radical overhaul if we were to deal with the kind of problems that we deal with. And it is starting to deal with that in urban areas. So it is certainly something that worries them. But same thing can be said for India. India can rethink and must rethink its food system radically as well. And it's a victim of the same issues you were saying before. There still is a portion of the population that doesn't have enough to eat because arable land is used for the wrong purposes,
Right.
and not for the right ones. So that needs to expand. But back to the point of what we can do to accelerate this. Definitely the work that Roger Lienhart and other visionaries like him are doing of scaling production of plant-based products and alternative products to the maximum, as opposed to the small growth, is the way to go. So if I can be a little more specific here and showing one vision as opposed to another. Typically when I'm dealing with an American company that innovates, and this is almost invariably the same, they always focus on the US market as if it were the ultimate market. And then from there, they want to expand. And so many times, Roger and I sit down with people and say, stop that. Just think globally and think that maybe you should start elsewhere and not here. So I'll give you one positive example. We are in the process of creating the most advanced baby and child food company there ever was. And our number one reference market where we will start from is China, as opposed to, Italy or the US or wherever it is. And it's by choice. You go to the largest market that is then going to probably resonate with the rest of Asia. And there are lots of strategies there. It doesn't mean we don't want to go to the US and we don't want to be available in Europe. But guess what? You can serve a market with 1.4 billion people. Why not? That's better than saying I'm going to start with a small European country.
I want to hop in again. You've said so much, and for those who haven't done the deep dive before that we're doing today, I want to kind of underscore and give them some more information. So I'm happy to hear that you're saying that you and Roger are really talking to those that already have the deep distribution channels, which would be meat and dairy. So those people have the factories, they have the capital investment, they have the distribution channels. And as tricky as it might be to say, oh gosh, now we're going to be working to meat and dairy, if you want the fastest change, indeed, one needs to do that. So I'm happy to hear that. Let me list a couple of the businesses. We've been slamming them thus far. Let's give them some props who are turning around. Smithfield, which is indeed a Chinese-owned company, they have out a product called Pure Plant. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. I believe it's Pure Plant burgers. JBS has just invested in JBS being one of the largest meat manufacturers in the world, have just invested in a plant-based innovation center. Cargill, which is still privately owned, has been making plant-based options and retracting, I'll say, moonwalking back from their meat businesses and really focusing on plant-based. Maple Leaf, which is a Canadian meat company, bought Light Life and Field Roast. Dannon, which is a dairy company, bought So Delicious and Silk. Those are plant-based dairy products. So you see that they are shifting, although just to give you a sense of the numbers, The last time I read, Cargill is spending maybe about 7% of its budget on plant-based options, and all the rest is still going to meat. So there's
7% is not small. 7% is not small.
It's a good beginning.
But there's a difference between the project that we're talking about is not these companies investing in small things or doing some experiments and bringing them on because they saw beyond meat, but we're talking about entire industries changing.
Yes.
For instance, we at Live Kindly focused on chicken. It's the consumption of chicken keeps rising in the West and elsewhere because it's absurdly perceived as a healthier choice. Imagine that. It beggars belief. But so what is happening is these very smart companies are investing with us and working alongside us. And what's happening is the goal is to replace all the animal chicken with plant-based chicken.
Yes.
And the best way to bring it out there is to have it distributed by the same people who distribute animal chicken. It's going to go on the same shelves. You're not competing against them. They're the ones working for it. And the wonderful news that in a very short amount of time, it's going to cost them less to do plant-based chicken than to do animal chicken. So guess what they're going to do? They're going to do plant-based as much as they can. And that's how it's going to change. So bringing them as the allies in the change is a positive thing.
It's in their best interest because it is going to cost them less ultimately, and that's going to give them a lot of it's better profits. But also what's exciting to me when I see these companies starting to replace meat options, because that's really what I want to see. I want to see meat being replaced. And as you say, it's an entire system overhaul, is then you start getting ad budgets dedicated to how manly it is to eat plants. And that's what I'm waiting for, because that cultural shift happens when you have those big advertising budgets behind. And then shortly after that, because as we know, governments are very rare to change. It's consumers that demand the change and businesses that also need their bottom line to be better. Governments are usually like the last thing to change. Then we're going to see government subsidies going to plant-based foods, because I don't think those companies are going to give up their subsidies. They're just going to shift them to their new product lines. So that's what I'm looking to see.
Yeah, absolutely. That we'll see what happens then. This is a moment when the world economies are having to rethink everything. And I think one fundamental thing is that they can no longer just give away subsidies, the way they are, especially to failing industries. So they're going to have to rethink that completely. So the one thing that I wanted to mention, though, because I love talking about the big systems and the big ideas, but I think we need to spend a second to and dedicate it to the small businesses that are suffering right now. And I would really like to take a chance to encourage people to support their local businesses, especially, of course, the vegan ones, so that we can bring them forward and help them cross this very difficult time. So if you live anywhere near any vegan business, vegan store, vegan restaurant, anyone who's doing deliveries, please help them out and make your choices. So I don't think Amazon needs our money desperately nowadays. But the little business next door that sells directly and now is shut, but maybe is going to do deliveries, if you help them, really needs a hand. So I would encourage everyone to do that. And there are lots of options for that. I'm going to do something a little self-serving here, but I want to mention that there's a phenomenal business called Plantable, which you maybe know, that does vegan food delivery, and they provide you with 1 week of food in one shipment. It's frozen but ready, so it takes a few seconds to reheat and prepare, but it's so convenient. And they're based in New York, and they need our help as well. And like them, there are others that we could mention several, but I really think that we should dedicate time to and energy to people who need us to survive and get across this time.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. We've been doing that on this show a little bit. There, I'm originally from Chicago, and there's a Chicago deep dish pizza restaurant that is vegan. And so when you think of deep dish pizza, it's 2 inches of cheese, and they figured out a way to do it vegan. It is so good. Kitchen 17. So I've been deep freezing these pizzas and sending them around to people around the United States. But of course, they're not just the only ones. We've had a bunch of small businesses here on the show. It's Jerky, y'all. They need your attention out of Texas. Vistro.com also will send you stuff right to your house. They're a big supporter of this show. So Vistro.com, you can say, I sent you, Alfano, and they'll help you out there. So, just lots of options. You're so right. Support our small businesses.
Too. So,
and great food.
Makes our life easier, but also there. So, yeah, excellent.
So a quickie question. We were talking about chicken being considered a healthier option. I just want to put this statistic out for people. So as we know right now, we are in coronavirus and we're social distancing, but we make up about 15% of the planet in terms of living, breathing, sentient beings. There are about 100 billion animals every year slaughtered for food. There are about 7.7 billion people on the planet. So animals represent about 85% of the planet in terms of living, breathing individuals. And factory farms are by definition not social distancing them. So chickens in particular are the worst of this. They live beak to beak. They live right on top of each other. So as you consider how people need social distancing, but you're not social distancing the other 85% of the planet, it is impossible to outrun a pandemic. And so for health reasons, you really want to reconsider chicken for many health reasons, but particularly in this coronavirus time, it's, to me, very strange to consider chicken a health food. So how do we make it go faster, Sebastiano? How do we get change faster?
Well, I think that we need to, as vegans, we need to produce the change not only by our choices, but by bringing this choice and this knowledge in a gentler way to those who are considering change. And I would take advantage of this particular time because never before it was so obvious, but not widely discussed, that the current problem comes from what we want to change. It comes from the fact that people eat animals.
Yes.
It's absolutely shocking how much time, hours, ink is wasted discussing this pandemic, and nobody wants to talk about why it happened. It's just unbelievable. And we're talking about the cures, we're talking about the remedies, we're talking about long-term, short-term. Nobody wants to mention, oh, by the way, this happened because people eat animals, and this will happen again, and maybe even worse because there's factory farming and not just wet markets.
You haven't fixed the problem, so
the problem is still there, and the wet markets are open all over the place. As you probably know, PETA did an investigation and brought up a well-known fact. There are 80 wet markets in New York City. It's unbelievable. And
there are 14 in Chicago.
Yeah, so it's horrifying. And by the way, they are in clear violation of existing laws, but nobody has the guts to go and shut them down. And again, this is corruption, moral corruption, call it whatever you want, but it is unbelievable. If I may bring something up that reconnects to what you were saying in the very beginning, I would like to mention something about my personal history. I'm involved in this because I love animals. And what happened with me was that at 15 years old, someone in the middle of the street in Milan, where I was born, gave me a flyer about animal experimentation. I started reading, overnight became a vegetarian, then obviously later a vegan when I understood more. But from that moment on, I became an animal rights activist. And what I wanted to mention is a few things. One is activism is fundamental, that there are people at tables in the street or with videos nowadays or doing this, distributing literature is fundamental. It can happen, it does change people's lives. Like it changed mine and it changed many others. The other thing I want to mention, which is very important right now, the organizations we love that care about what you and I are discussing and that help us bring the change are in dire need of help. Because, of course, in an economic crisis, the first thing people do is they stop donating to charities, so-called.
Yeah.
So our beloved organizations that do undercover investigations and help us reveal what happens behind the scenes that the industry is trying to hide are important, and they need our help. So Mercy for Animals and Animal Equality, to which I'm very close. But at the same time, this morning I was talking to Damien Mender with the
I love him.
National Anti-Poaching Foundation,
Mm.
and he's doing phenomenal work in Africa, changing the continent, empowering women, and creating a new culture of how people should eat and live and cohabitate with animals. So please don't forget all the organizations that need your help. They need it more today than ever. And of course, my beloved Sea Shepherd, which is doing, has not stopped for 1 second. I would like you to know that while all of this is happening, Sea Shepherd is at work around the world protecting animals.
Yes.
With the same strength and courage and selflessness they always have. So
And not stopping.
Please help them all.
Yes, one of the things we talk about on this program a lot is that activism takes its many forms. So you can help people financially, or these organizations financially. You can take a flyer or a sign to the street and you can protest, and you can use your dollars 3 times a day. You vote with your dollars, you vote with every choice you make on your plate. And when you double that by using your voice behind your dollars, you really make an impact. And I firmly believe that if you start spending your dollars where your values are, you really will see a shift. So there are many ways to be an activist. Of course, please support these organizations that haven't stopped because of coronavirus. They're going stronger than ever. But you can also remember that you always must use your dollars. To see the future that you want, you have to start using your dollars now for the future you want to see.
And by the way, you may have seen that Animal Equality started a petition with the UN to close wet markets, which raised 400,000 signatures in 1 week. And it was picked up by one of the UN representatives, biodiversity representative. But the work these organizations do is very important. And to create awareness, you were asking me, how do we make this, how do we produce the change? The change is we offer alternative options, but we also provide information. The ag-gag laws are trying to stop us from showing people what happens behind closed doors. And I would like to remind everyone, and you can Google this very easily, 60 Minutes ran a program that showed that during an outbreak of salmonella, the pork industry refused to give the CDC access to the farms where the outbreak had started to investigate it. So we're at a point where this industry is so protective of its own crimes that not even federal agencies can go and investigate an outbreak of an illness that caused several deaths. So we're at a point where information is fundamental. So the role of the organization is key in that as well.
Yes, let me just underscore for those maybe who don't know, an ag-gag law is, I believe it's in 11 states, it might be in 13, where it is illegal to actually go in with a camera and show what is happening illegally behind closed doors. So that industry is so protected that no one knows what is going on in their food supply. Basically, that that is what it means, and that is a fundamental right for everyone to know where their food comes from, how it is grown, how it is treated, what's in it. And that does not happen because of ag-gag laws. So very well defended industry against really consumer interests.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
So there's just really so much to talk about, but I'm wondering, because you fund so much and you're involved in so much, is there anything missing that you'd like to see? Any key pivotal point that we need to be able to advance that you're not seeing right now in the marketplace?
It's the marketplace. Well, yes, I think that again we need to improve distribution and production. But there's another point that I'd like to underscore, which is how I think it is very important for anyone involved in our cause to underscore the role of women in all parts of society and in our movement. It is key to have more women in places of command in companies, places of command in governments, in politics in general, because they have more common sense on top of many other qualities. But they can look at a crisis like this, and if you look at some of the countries that handle this crisis better, they have women prime ministers, and it's not by chance. It's applying common sense. It's applying compassion. It's doing everything that is necessary. So, in our field, the field of food and plant-based food, what I would like to see is more space and more investment in companies run by women. And I would like to see more women come forward, and the ones that are in our industry are phenomenal. There are great examples, but we need more, and we need more encouragement, and we need more investments in women in general. And this should be a requirement. When you go and look at a company and you say, okay, you're vegan, you're doing this, you're environmentally correct, blah blah. How many women are involved in your company? And who has the role of stirring the ship and deciding the path? I want to see women involved. And by the way, I'm sure you well know, it is a statistic fact that companies run by women, companies that have women CEOs, are more successful and financially stable than companies run by men. So for me, it is also an obvious choice. But we need that. We need more roles for women. And I'm happy that that's somehow shifting in some of the animal rights organizations, and it was about time. But we need to see more of that in food companies and in other plant-based companies.
I want to give shout out to the women CEOs who've either been on this show or about to be on this show. So Christy Legali of Rebellious Foods, who does not love her? And in fact, I would say, if I were, because I interview so many people and I study this so much, what I would like to see missing from the business equation, if you will, is the manufacturing engineering behind getting all of this out. You don't necessarily produce plant-based foods the way you produce meat and dairy, so it does need new technology, and there's all this innovation happening with food, and I'm so happy about the veg tech space, and I love that it all tastes so great, and it's coming to me at a lower price every day, and it's more convenient every day. It's wonderful, but I know that we need to produce on a scale that can feed the world, and so you do need different technology for that. So I would love to see more of that. But shout out to Christy Legali. Shout out to New Wave Foods, because their co-founder and also their CEO, two women, Shiak Meats. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. She is about to be on my show. Wonderful founder.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, cellular agriculture for shrimp and more seafood type things. So I'm very happy to have her on the show. But yes, we don't see enough women. So thank you for bringing that up.
We need many more.
We need many more.
You should, if I may suggest, you haven't had Nadia Pinavaya of Plantable yet, but he's a phenomenal entrepreneur, and she would be a phenomenal addition to.
I would love to have her on. So let me ask you, as you go to talk to these heads of meat and dairy companies, I'm sure very few people on the planet actually want to torture animals. This is my belief. So I believe if you can show them the numbers, they'll go with it. Is that correct? Or what kind of reaction are you getting from the heads of meat and dairy?
Well, many of the families involved in these industries are desperately looking for change, and some of the new generations don't want to be involved with that because they realize that it is just bad at 360 degrees.
Yes.
So many of them have a very good conscience, and they want to really change and be the actors of this change. So there are good people everywhere, and there are heartless people, but the majority, I would say, are see the light when they know the facts.
Yeah, it's wonderful, and not everything is business. It's just that this show is here because I feel that I need to show people the business options if we are to actually have change. Because people need to. You can't just say don't eat meat and dairy. It's too hard for people. You have to give them a replacement. So, and I want as many replacements to come out as possible. But I do. Believe that these companies will shift if given the better option, and that we're seeing more of that is actually encouraging to me. I know somebody wants to ask a question. Vic Rao, please go ahead and write your question and I'll try to see it. And then one of my guests has reminded me that Miyoko has been on my show, of course, and isn't she
phenomenal?
That's right.
And can I also mention that there's a company in Finland called Golden Green that has created a few years ago pulled oats to replace pulled pork. And it's extremely successful. And their products are now being used by Taco Bell to replace chicken in Europe and hopefully soon in the US. So another fantastic example of company founded by two women that really did an extraordinary job.
I always feel like I know everybody, but I've never heard of that before. Golden Green. I'm going to look at
Gold
that.
And green, yes.
Gold and green.
It's oat-based, and by the way, it's delicious, which is fundamental.
Yes, which is, of course, fundamental. Well, I don't know if you can do this, but you have a very unique vantage point because you are involved in so many businesses. You see so many startups and fund so many of them. What predictions can you make for us? Where are we going from here? Of course, we're going plant-based. The world really doesn't have an option. We've done the math for everybody here on this show. There's really no other way to go. But in more detail than that, can you tell us when we're going to get there and what it's going to look like?
It's hard to tell exactly when, and COVID may be an accelerator of change. We have to see.
Yes.
What is obvious is that it is impossible to hide information. So the anti laws that we mentioned before don't hold water, and in fact, when they've been challenged legally, they obviously collapse. But it is impossible to prevent information. So people are becoming more and more conscious of their health issues and their health choices, and they want to eat better. So the great rise of plant-based food is, if you want, unfortunately, not coming because people care more about the animals.
Right.
But the main factor has been people choosing to eat a healthier diet. And there's no way around that. People cannot be kept in ignorance. They want to read the label. They want to know what they're eating and drinking, and they will make choices. So there are very interesting phenomena happening, and everybody attributes it to the millennials, but it's a more vast segment of the population. So people are shying away from meat. They don't want to eat anything that can damage their health. They're shying away from sugar, which is another one of the deadly ingredients that are shoved down people's throats all the time. But I would say, in perspective, what can happen, and which is why something like your program is extremely useful. The more information people have, the better choices they will make. There's no way on earth that anyone would eat what they normally eat, meat or fish, even worse, if they knew what they're putting in their mouth. A shout out to again, Animal Equality for and other organizations what used to be called Compassion Over Killing, and now it's Animal Outlook.
I love them.
Yes, I adore them. I'm on their board actually, so
I work with them too.
Fantastic, beautiful, and they put out a phenomenal investigation about fish farming, and again, they need our support because these investigations are key. Once you show people what they're eating when they're eating farm fish, let alone so-called wild caught, destroying the oceans at a rhythm that is unthinkable. But farm fish is the most deplorable, unhealthy, scary food that one could ever eat. and people take for granted that fish is healthy. There are doctors who think that eating fish is healthy. It's mind-boggling.
Well, so we could have several shows here together. We could talk just about the misinformation that doctors get and the absurdity that medical school doesn't have more than 4 hours, sometimes maybe 8 hours, but that would be lucky and extreme if they had any nutrition education. And yet these people are often in the position of power to tell people what to eat, and they really have no idea themselves. But to further what you're saying, farmed fish, these fish come out deformed, living in cesspools of chemicals and waste, and then plugged with antibiotics so that they can still make it to your plate, and you are getting all that waste, all that unhealthy way of living.
And you're still getting, you may have read this, but you're getting nowadays 40 more kinds of deadly bacteria in fish than you did a few years ago, because of the way they're raised and the way the system works. So imagine that you put something on your plate thinking that it's healthy, and it contains bacteria that at times can be deadly to you immediately. It's mind-boggling. I don't know, but anyway, so the more information people get, the better the choices they will make. It is very important that we as vegans put these choices in front of people in a gentle way. We cannot threaten people and mistreat them because they don't eat like us or they don't think like us. We have to put our way of thinking there and the information in a very kind way, and accept that people will take time to come to the right choice. And maybe they won't, but that's, with food, you're touching emotional points that are fundamental. There are people who think back of what their grandmother used to cook for them or what they ate as a child, and they don't want to give that memory up. So it's very important to be kind. I understand and share the anger because animals are suffering as we speak, and it is urgent to save them. At the same time, if we want to be effective, the best way to do it is to be kind when we put our options there. One of my favorite people, whom because I think you had him on the show, is Ethan Brown.
Love him.
One of the most determined people you could ever meet, but at the same time has kindness towards everyone. And I'll share a story with you. I went there and I became an investor in late 2012. And one of the things that made it click for me was seeing Ethan interact with his team, because he was very intelligent, but absolutely respectful and kind with everyone, which is fundamental. And Seth Coleman, the executive chairman now, is exactly cut from the same cloth. Phenomenally bright and fast and hyperactive and extremely kind and respectful, truly respectful of others, which I think we all need to be.
And both of them so incredibly smart, not just about plant-based foods, but how we're going to change agriculture and the different agriculture farming techniques that we need to do to save our planet environmentally as well. Since we're sharing stories, I'll say that Ethan Brown launched Beyond Sausage in my kitchen.
Fantastic. Wow.
So I have all these pictures of Ethan, frying up some sausage because for our interview. It's really, really fun. But I've also interviewed him for NPR and other ways to get the word out. I do love him.
And they really made this revolution happen. Okay, they placed plant-based food on the map for investors who would have never considered it and didn't even think that it made sense. And so big thanks to them and to the others who are making this effort. And there are many talented entrepreneurs out there who nowadays are not as big as Beyond Meat, but they're doing a phenomenal job, and they will be as big as that. And one word I would like to dedicate to my very good friend Chris Kerr. I don't know if you've interviewed him, but he is the one who showed me the way, and his wife Kirsty is the one who showed it to him. So we owe a debt to her. And my wife Jane is the one that shows me the way every single day. Chris Kerr is the one who showed me that there was a way to invest in vegan. And I was desperately looking for things to do, and mostly supporting organizations and trying to find an effective way to make this happen. And Chris Kerr just showed me the way, and he's the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing nowadays.
So we are all indebted to him.
Kirsty, absolutely. And his wife Kirsty is the one who showed him what was needed, and therefore enlightened all of us. And again, it's women who show us the way. Like my wife Jane teaches me every day how to be more effective in bringing these ideas to the world in a kind and effective way, as opposed to being as aggressive as I would normally be.
Well, it's one of the things we talk about a lot on this show. First of all, remember, you're talking about people. You can't keep information from people. So I always like to tell people, regardless of plant-based, advocate for yourselves first. Don't let your doctor give you the answer. Don't expect government to do it for you. You must educate yourself. Go look online, see what's right for you. I believe if you do that, plant-based will be the option that you choose for yourself, but you must advocate for yourselves. And in addition, you are extremely powerful. You might watch the television and think, oh my gosh, this politician and that politician, everybody's crazy, but they're all after your dollars. Your dollars speak so loudly and so clearly. So when you vote with your dollars and you advocate for yourself, you really can live by example. And I always feel that that's a great way to bring information to people, is just live your happy plant-based vegan self life. And people are going to say like, well, I want some of that. I want some happy, some healthy, some longevity, some aging backwards. I want all these things. So,
I think it's worth always asking the question, who makes this product? What's inside it? What other products they make? And is everything in line with my way of thinking? They have this phenomenal product, but guess what? At the same time, they're producing something that is really bad. Well, I might choose another brand. And you're absolutely right. Your dollars speak so much louder than anything else, which is what was shown by the rise of Beyond Meat and other fantastic products like these.
So how do we invest if we're not in your particular position? This is one of the frustrating things to me. I'm not at the level where I can really get into venture capital. And if I do want to invest, Beyond Meat's really my only option from a stock portfolio perspective.
Soon there will be others. Sure. At the same time, a lot of these small startups are resorting to crowdfunding nowadays. Which is a way in which you can invest as little as $10 and do something and contribute to the change. But also, there are other ways. There are ways, bring together a group of friends and each one investing as little as they want to do and pull together. And you will be able to make a difference and invest in a company if you bring your forces together. I've seen this and I encourage this. And I will always be a conduit for people who want to do this through different vehicles. I do this regularly with some of my friends who may not have the strength to invest by themselves, but pull them together and give them a way to contribute, and they will.
I will be following up with you after this show. I want to learn more about that possibility. Speaking of powerful women, Lisa Faria of Glasswall Syndicate and Stray Dog Capital has been on this phenomenal. She's been on this show as well. Very interesting, folks. Pool your resources together and get a little chunk of the future, because this is the future.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but by the way, while she's doing all the incredible things she's doing, Lisa is also training for an Ironman.
Yes, I'd love to watch her on Instagram. Yeah,
she's unstoppable.
She is unstoppable, and she's a mother with kids, and it's not like she's 22. So good for her. So this is a bit of a tricky question, but I think we can get a lot from you. What do you wish you knew 10 years ago that you know now?
Wow, very, very good question. Where do I start? It's like 1,000 things. But let's see. I think that what I didn't know 10 years ago is that you can break more ground and gain more traction if you work with the ones you perceive as enemies or competitors. And
I love this.
so forging alliances with those who you think are on the other side is often very useful.
I
And
love this.
and I see it in activism, and I see it in many other ways. A couple of examples. Leah Garces, one of my favorite people, current
Mercy for
president of
animals.
Mercy for Animals, reached out to chicken farmers and established a conversation with them. And this is described in her phenomenal book. So that's an example. But also someone else I absolutely admire, Camilla Fox of Project Coyote, an organization that focuses on apex predators, whose importance cannot be, it cannot be overestimated. It's unbelievable. And she has an open conversation with farmers, with legislators, and with everyone, always looking at the issue from their point of view and sitting on their side to understand it better. So this is something that I think is a lesson that I've learned over time.
So basically, you've given us here the definition of empathy, to put yourself in someone else's shoes and to see it from their perspective. And while you may or may not have access to the heads of meat and dairy like Sebastiano does, you do, through social media, you do have access to the people on the other side of the proverbial aisle. I'm not taking political sides here. I'm just saying, on the opposite of the meat and dairy aisle than you do have a chance to talk to them with kindness and see it from their shoes.
And let me give you a very practical example, because we've seen this before. Don't go in front of your local butcher shop with signs screaming and bloody murder and insulting them. Make them your friends and ask them if they can carry plant-based meat so you can buy it at their store. Yes. This way you're going to win, instead of creating enemies all over the place.
I always tell people that when I walk into a shoe store, I say, show me your vegan shoe section. And when they say, we don't have a vegan shoe section, I pull out my credit card and I say, I've got a lot of money to spend. So when you get a vegan shoe section, you can let me know, or we can go through all the shoes right now. You can pull out the ones that are vegan for me. But otherwise, I'm not spending any money. And that usually works. So we have money in common there. So there's
absolutely.
Yes. So a couple quick exit questions. You've been so kind with your time today, and I'm learning so much just from being with you. So thank you for all you do. Thank you for all you.
From you. It's the other way around.
So very kind, all that you inspire all of us and all the work you've already done. I'm talking a lot about business today, but please, I am by no means overshadowing all the work you've done with animal organizations, International Anti-Poaching Foundation, the Coyote Project, you Mercy for Animals, Animal Equality, Animal Outlook. Shepherd. I mean, you've just Sea Shepherd. You've worked with so
Animal
many.
Outlook, yes,
Animal Outlook. Just some wonderful, wonderful people. So thank you for today. If you are having a bad day, and with coronavirus, many days have been bad for people in a row, is there something that you tell yourself to get your mind back in play? A phrase you say to yourself to get back in the game?
Definitely, but this I've done since I was a teenager and I got involved in this. I always think about who has it worse than you, especially the animals. Yes. We're suffering, and I know many people have brought this up before, but we're suffering because we're confined inside a house. Think of gestating pigs who are confined in a cage their entire life. They cannot even turn. So there's always more suffering than anything we can have. Just bring your thoughts to those who suffer more than you, and your day will certainly be better, and your energies will be back, because there's so much work that we can do. And frankly, I don't think there's any time to just cry away and just be idly desperate.
Yes, no time to waste, and no time like the present to start working in whatever capacity you can. Might be financial, it might be just online. I don't want to say just, because that's important too. Might be on social media, might be just by using your dollars, aligning your purchasing power with your values. There's many ways to start, but start right now, because your future depends on it. So my last exit question for you: what's your favorite junk food?
Oh my. Okay. Difficult question. How do I mention one without but I'm a big. I don't know if I would call it junk food. I don't like junk
Snack?
food as a category, but I love chocolate, for instance. So
Mm.
vegan chocolate is fundamental to get me going and to keep me going on any given day. And but there are so many interesting brands doing phenomenal foods. Can I mention brands just because I know
Yes,
them?
yes,
And I'm
please.
not even an investor yet, so they'll hold me
Yet. I love
somewhat.
it.
But the soft drinks scenario is changing drastically, and there's one vegan brand in the UK called Nixon Kicks that makes these phenomenal drinks with very low calorie, no sugar added, and there's a touch of chili pepper, and I
Oh,
love them. They're just phenomenal.
fun.
And there's a phenomenal brand in the US that is created a cross between tea and non-alcoholic beer. Again, 0 calories, but the best flavor in the world, and that's called hop tea. So on
Okay.
any given day, I cannot survive if I'm not drinking Nixon Kicks or hop tea. And I'm bugging them to become an investor, but I haven't been successful yet. But
Oh my gosh.
I
Well, I love that you say chocolate because, of course, chocolate goes with wine. So I do want to say thank you for all you do. Salute a lei. Thank you,
thank you
Sebastiano, for being here and for sharing all of your wisdom and for being so active, for really
so much.
putting your money behind your values and for making these small businesses and large businesses a reality, for being there to negotiate with meat and dairy and for government officials as well, and for getting behind your passion and really showing with kindness how we can help to change the world, because as you say, there is no time to lose. Everybody, this interview, which was so phenomenal, is going to be on the Awesome Vegans podcast, so you can find it if you missed any part of it. A clip is going to be on LinkedIn tomorrow, but the full thing is also going to be on my website at elizabethalfano.com. Sebastiano, we owe you such a debt of gratitude. Thank
I'm
you.
very grateful to you. And can I close with a statement?
Please.
Can I encourage everyone to go to the activists they know and give them a big hug? And I thank you for what they do every day.
Yes, they are such an integral part of, Beyond Meat is there for sure, but it's also those activists that are changing consumer
Absolutely.
minds and hearts. And, information really is the key to power. And information has been tried to be withheld from us through ag-gag laws, and the activists are the ones getting that information out. So we are indebted to them as well, for
Absolutely.
sure. Sebastiano, thank you. I know it is late. And are you in Switzerland today or Italy?
I'm in Switzerland, yes.
You're in Switzerland today. Well, thank you for all that you do. Thank you for staying up late with us. And I hope that you'll be back. I think we could have this
Thank you.
conversation
Absolutely.
in many
Anytime.
different ways. So thank you for all you do. And I will follow up with you about investing.
Wonderful. Thank you for all you do. And I want to thank Jane as well for hosting us today. She's a phenomenal activist and example for all of us.
So I will close out with thanking Sebastiano and thanking Jane Velez Mitchell, because we're talking about powerhouse women today.
Yes.
Jane moves the needle for animals. Absolutely, 100%. As do you, Sebastiano, but Jane does as well. So enormous gratitude to Jane Velez Mitchell, who has this channel, the Plant-Based Business Hour, 1:00 every day, always on Jane Unchained right here. Sebastiano, come back. We can't get enough of you. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody. Ciao a tutti. Bye. Sebastiano, hold on for 1 second. Bye, everybody.
Absolutely.